Welcome to National Parks Traveler, where we explore the national parks and the issues that involve them.
You might not entirely appreciate the wonders and majesty of national parks unless you venture out after dark and gaze up at what often is referred to as the other half of the park system. The view can be quite dazzling, with planets, stars, the Milky Way, and for the lucky few, a comet or shooting star. This is Jess Repanshek, your host at the National Parks Traveler. Sadly, not every park offers such dazzling views. Light pollution reaches more than a few national parks and can really infringe on your nighttime enjoyment of the parks. Gavin Heffernan is among those park travelers who are troubled by light pollution. He's a California-based photographer with a unique long-form time-lapse style of photography, and he's hoping that this approach brings a fresh awareness to the wonders of night skies in the national parks and creates advocacy to fight light pollution and the damage it wreaks on natural habitats. Lynn Riddick sat down with Gavin recently to better understand his work. We'll be back with Lynn and Gavin after this short break.
Washington's National Park Fund is the official philanthropic partner serving Mount Rainier, North Cascades, and Olympic National Parks. WNPF raises funds for scientific research, youth experiences, volunteer programs, and projects that preserve and protect these national parks in Washington state. Learn how you can help at WNPF.org. This program is brought to you in part by the National Park Friends Alliance. Join the Friends community and be part of a network focused on philanthropy in national parks. Membership in the Friends Alliance gives you access to professional networking opportunities, discounts on annual meetings, and resources to support your park partnership. To learn more about the Alliance's work and to become a member, visit friendsalliance.org.
What's it going to take to preserve our national parks for now and generations to come? Well, awareness of the issues is a good place to start. Today, my guest is Gavin Heffernan. He's a photographer who has launched PARKLIGHT, a project that employs time-lapse photography to showcase national parks during the often stunning transition from day into night. Hi, Gavin. Welcome to The Traveler.
Hi there. Thank you for having me. Thanks so much.
So for starters, in case any listeners want to go online and see your work as we talk about your photography, where should they go?
Probably the easiest way to go is to Gavin Heffernan Time-Lapse Travel on YouTube, and that's where I've been posting the PARKLIGHT videos and a lot of other interesting things I've been shooting along the way. And my website is also gavinbheffernan.com. That has a lot more stuff there as well, but that'll help you kind of see what we're talking about.
Okay, great. Well, let's hear about your PARKLIGHT project. How did it start? What is it?
Yeah, basically, the idea came to me during the shutdown last year. And I think, like a lot of people, I was just sort of feeling frustrated and helpless. And it's kind of hard to feel like you can make any difference at all with so many things that are going wrong with the world these days. But I sort of just thought, it's not really up to you to change everything. It's just up to you to try to do whatever little part you can do to try to make a difference. And for each person, that's something a little different. Some people are painters, some people are good at planting trees, some people can take pictures. And for me, that's sort of where I found a bit of a passion for shooting the night sky and shooting some of these national parks about 15 years ago. And so it just seemed like a good reason and a good time to try to catalyze that, put it together, and use that as an excuse to go to some of these parks I never had a chance to go to, and just sort of try to tie it together with this idea of advocacy and awareness. And even though the shutdown ended pretty quickly after I started the project, I realized that the need and what's missing in the parks is something that isn't going away, and that the need for awareness and advocacy is kind of infinite. So the journey continues, and really we're just getting started now.
So what was your impression of the parks that you went to during the shutdown? It was 43 days long. You said that you kind of waited to the end of it. to go into the parks and do some of this photography. But what was your feel for the parks during the shutdown?
Well, it was interesting. Yeah, I think I started in Yosemite, and it was Yosemite and Zion were the first two parks we went to during the actual shutdown. And in a lot of ways, things were not that different, at least to my eye. There were tons of people working very hard to keep the buses going and to keep the trash being taken out, and you could see certain buildings that were closed and certain things that weren't working out. But I think that what you learn about these parks is there's such a passionate network of people that are not doing it to get rich, and they're not doing it because this is some lucrative job opportunity that's gonna glow their resume up for the rest of their life. They do it because they just want to be close to the places and to the energy, and because they really do genuinely care. And so it was an interesting situation in that sense that, people were there, they were enjoying the parks, but kind of unaware that the amount of strain that was being put on the people that were there trying to keep it going. So it's interesting. I think it's the parks themselves are kind of easy to take for granted because they just sort of seem like, well, they've always been here. That rock's a billion years old, and it'll be here in a billion years from now. But it doesn't take long spending time there to realize how important the people are to actually maintaining that and to maintaining the timelessness that seems almost like something that could be that wouldn't need help, but it certainly does.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So, Parklight is kind of a spin-off or a continuation of your 2016 Skyglow project. So, how did that come about, and what kind of success or feedback did you get from that kind of crafted what you're doing now?
Yeah, that's the Skyglow project was sort of something that inspired this. And yeah, about 10 years ago, an AFI classmate of mine named Harun Mekmedinovich,
AFI?
we yeah, we went to film school together, and that's kind of most of my background is in screenwriting and more in terms of narrative, scary movies and things like that. So sometimes with these park shoots, I try to sort of bring that sensibility to it and try to tell a story, even if it's just a sunrise and a sunset and a lightning storm and things that wouldn't necessarily have a narrative cohesion to it, but I try to bring that to it. But yeah, but 10 years ago, we were sort of connected by this idea that we would often go out into nature to try to escape some of the stresses of the day job. So when you're dealing with sort of big feature films, it's often millions of dollars at stake and tons of pressure and politics and a lot of angst that comes with the art. And so sometimes it was a bit of a godsend to be able to escape the cities and escape into these parks and escape into the type of projects that all you had to answer to was the art itself. And there was a sort of a relief and a purity in that. And that was something that I had shared and Haroon was interested in. And what we found was as we got into the night sky shooting, we had to keep going further and further away from the cities to escape the light pollution and to escape the sort of city spread that had started ruining even some of these national park skies. And so that kind of made us aware of this idea of light pollution and how damaging and how dangerous it actually is. For us, it was just a problem with taking nice pictures, but what we realized is it was impacting insects, plants, humans, everything we couldn't possibly have known at the beginning. And so out of that, we essentially launched this Kickstarter Skyglow project, which would essentially allow us to take on this idea, travel across North America and photograph some of the most endangered night sky locations. And a big core of that was national parks because they were some of these places that were essentially, putting up a moat around the exterior and protecting the skies from buildings that would come in and ruin that night. So it was a big part of it, and I think what Haroon and I both learned with that project was it was a good way to sort of take something we were passionate about artistically and creatively, but wrap that into an actual issue and into something that we could actually make into an advocacy issue. And that was really helpful, and we were able to get a lot of great press, and hopefully help raise a little bit of awareness with the International Dark Sky Association. And that was that was in the background. And then with this parks issue, I just thought it was something I could kind of continue a little bit and try to take that into the next frontier and go to places I hadn't had a chance to visit with the Sky Glow project.
And just to back up, AFI is American Film Institute.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yep. So I came here from Canada in 2004, and Haroon was here 1 year after that, and yeah, so it's kind of a different world than this night sky photography stuff, but I think that they do overlap a little bit in terms of the creativity and the aspiration to try to tell a story through the visuals. Most people don't really want to be lectured, or they don't want to be given a bunch of stats. They don't want to have the medicine. They want to have the medicine wrapped in the candy of the sort of exciting video, hopefully, or something that catches their attention. And so the art side of things is often sometimes what makes the education part a little more palatable, and that's at least how we try to approach it. And just and with this PARKLIGHT stuff, I just try to make something that really just shows how beautiful the parks are to me, and what it felt like to me, and then hopefully that just helps get people interested and to pay attention and maybe take a trip themselves and take their kids. And again, it's a drop in the bucket, but it's sort of my drop in the bucket, and it's what I feel like I can do. And I think everybody has their own different abilities and different things that they can focus on. And some people may have $1 billion in their pocket and they don't know what to do with it. This is a good example of where they can put it. So, I don't have that particular problem, but doing my best.
You live in Los Angeles, so it follows that 3 of the parks that you showcased in your PARKLIGHT project are in California. You mentioned Yosemite, but also Channel Islands and Joshua Tree. And then also, like you mentioned, you photographed Zion in Utah. So what parks are next on your list to be photographed, and how did you decide on them?
Started with the closest ones and the easiest ones to make life simple in that sense. And ironically, the Channel Islands is technically the closest one there is, but because you have to take a ferry there, and because it seems out of the way in that sense, it's one of the most undervisited parks. But basically, I'm kind of working my way up the West Coast, and next we'll be looking at Death Valley and Pinnacles, and then sort of some of the bigger trips are in July, where we're going to go up to Alaska. My wife and I are going to go, and we're going to be hitting up our Kenai Fords, Denali, a few other ones up there, Crater Lake. So we're kind of working up on the West Coast, and then going to sort of move over into Yellowstone and White Sands in New Mexico is just this sort of striking visual that I love to kind of capture. And so essentially, yeah, it's working with trajectory right now, but then I think later on I'm going to work on the East Coast and try some in Florida and Smoky Mountains and those places there. And kind of work our way through it. I've sort of roped my wife into this as well. So she's kind of a little more of a glamper than a camper, but I tricked her because for Christmas I got her this water bottle that you have to put stickers on it for each national park you visited. So now the obsession of putting new stickers on a new park, it's got her excited to kind of visit as many as she can with me. So that's part of the plan as well.
That's great. It sounds exciting for sure.
Yeah.
You mentioned the International Dark Sky Association, and as you know, dozens of units of the National Park Service have met the criteria to be recognized as dark sky parks. So what strikes you when you're in one of these dark national parks on a cloudless night and you look up at the sky?
Yeah, it's exciting to see. And even I noticed in Zion that they had really because I stayed at the actual lodge, which is inside the park, and it's fairly big lodge with big parking lots and a lot of logistics to be figured out. But they have these incredible dark sky lighting, so it's this sort of amber glow. It points down instead of facing in all directions, and sort of having just been hip deep in this world for a while, you really started to see the difference. And it's kind of that balance between functionality where you're not tripping over your own feet, but not using excess light where it changes the environment and the ecosphere. But I think like the most exciting thing for me when I kind of get out there and get away from everything and all the sounds is it puts a lot of things in perspective. It puts a lot of your problems in perspective, and it kind of you're able to look at life and think about what it would have been like here before any of the concrete and before any of the noise and the chaos of what we brought to it. And so I think that timelessness is something that's really special. And I know for me it helps often when I'm sort of really overwhelmed and stressed by the life of the city, and suddenly then you can just stare up at the galaxies and lose yourself in the infinite majesty of it. And I think that's a big part of it. And sometimes for me, I think the photography stuff is that excuse that gets me out there and gets me to stay up till 4 o'clock in the morning to reset the cameras. And sometimes it can get a little slow, and you're sort of just forced to take it in. And no cell service, so I can't scroll and doom scroll. I have to just sit there and be lost in my thoughts and lost in what's happening up there in the sky. So I think it's important. I think it's important for a lot of people, and it's something. It's a different kind of therapy that is a little cheaper, and I think actually can be pretty effective for some people too. So it's good for I think young people to learn that at an early age, especially when we're bombarded with screens. And I could, even in this last trip in Joshua Tree, I kind of thought I would have cell service and I didn't. And then for that first couple hours, it was just like the itch and the urge to like check the screen. I was like scrolling it, even though there was nothing on it. I was just, but after a couple hours that it started to go away and you start to kind of become a person again. And so I think that is something that is overlooked a lot, but it's helpful, especially for young people, I think, to get away from it.
You didn't mention Big Bend National Park, and I'll share one of my experiences there. 2 years ago, it was June. I went with my husband and some friends, and it was 109 degrees
Oh my
while we were
God.
there during the day.
Oh,
But
okay.
one night, a big, beautiful storm rolled in, and the temp dropped down to 65. And that night, when everybody was asleep, I went out to look at the night sky, and it was just amazing. It was just,
Wow.
the sky was filled with so many stars. It was just beyond belief. And they were so vivid and bright, and talk about putting you into perspective. And then you take a look with your binoculars, and it's like the stars just go into the depths of infinity. And it's just incredible. And I just wish for everyone to have that experience.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's the big one I've wanted to go to as well. I've heard that that one can get incredibly dark, and then probably in June you're getting the big Milky Way core there as well. And yeah, it's a really exciting experience. I don't know who coined the phrase, but I know they would say half the park is after dark, and
I think that was Tyler Nordgren, the
yes,
astronomer.
that's great.
Yeah.
And he's incredible. Yeah, I've got his artwork hanging up in my house, and he was a contributor on our Sky Glow book as well. And he wrote a great piece about what the night sky means to him, and he's a great speaker about it. And yeah, it's a special thing, and it's when you're out there, it's hard to imagine. But and what also is kind of fun is when I take these pictures, you're often using very, very long exposures. So similar to the experience you had with the binoculars, uh, sometimes you'll leave the camera clicking for 20, almost 25 seconds. So it allows all this extra light to come in more than what your eye can see. So suddenly you're discovering, colors and shooting stars and nebulas and things that you couldn't even see with your eyes. So you get this extra kind of gift to unwrap when you process the footage, because suddenly you realize there were things there that you weren't even aware of that were happening. And that's kind of fun too. And it's happened before where like an aurora that I didn't know was happening was up in the sky, or an animal walks through, or something exciting like that. So yeah, it's hard work too, and so it's easy to remember it romantically, but when you're in it, you're kind of stubbing your toes and hitting your shins, and watching out for rattlesnakes and all that stuff. But that's kind of part of the adventure too, and part of what makes it exciting. And
Well,
I prefer places without big bears running around too, but that's unavoidable, I guess, for some of these.
this is Lynn Riddick, and I'll be back with Gavin Heffernan after this short break.
The Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation is the primary nonprofit fundraising partner for the Blue Ridge Parkway. It is made up of people who have a deep love for this majestic road and want to ensure that its natural beauty and the experiences it offers endure for generations to come. Show your appreciation at brpfoundation.org. Grand Canyon Conservancy is the official nonprofit partner of Grand Canyon National Park, working to protect one of the world's most awe-inspiring places. Through conservation, education, and cultural preservation, your membership and donations help keep the Grand Canyon thriving for generations to come. Learn how you can get involved at grandcanyon.org. Acadia National Park is one of the 10 most popular national parks in the United States. It's also one of the smallest and most vulnerable. That is why Friends of Acadia exists. Friends of Acadia is an independent organization of passionate people inspiring those who love this magnificent park to make a real and lasting difference for Acadia. You can make a difference at friendsofacadia.org. Support from readers and listeners like you make the National Parks Traveler possible every day of the year. If you enjoy the Traveler's content, please consider a donation at nationalparkstraveler.org.
I'm back now with Gavin Heffernan to hear more about his PARKLIGHT project. Well, you use long-form time-lapse photography. What is that exactly?
Yeah, I mean, basically what you do is, and you take essentially like one very high quality picture. So you're using a big, fast, wide lens, and you're using a raw format photo. And then, like I mentioned before, you're using these exposures almost 20, 25 seconds up at a pop. So suddenly what you see with your naked eye, you might be able to see now 4 or 5 times as much detail, which is great. You get a really stunning photo. But what the trick is, if you attach a remote control to the camera and you leave the camera there for, say, 3 hours, and you get away from the light pollution, you get away from the flashlights and the car lights, then what happens is you get that really high resolution picture, but you get it times 300 photos over say 3 hours. And then essentially what we do is you just animate those photos together to create video. So 24 frames per second, just like you would almost see in those old animation flipbook things, but you basically animate each picture to create video. But now you have this extremely high resolution quality video, so at about a 5K resolution that is just with all that great detail. And now suddenly you're able to see, with sort of the supervision of somebody that would be standing on the ground, but through the long exposure, it just allows you to get incredible detail. And now you couldn't do it in a city because all the lights from the skyscrapers and everything would drown everything out. But if you can get far enough away into the darkness and into these kind of magical parks, suddenly you're able to see some incredible stuff. And then also what I do is something called star stacking, which is basically, you use all the similar things I just described, but what you do is basically you drag, so as the sky rotates, or as we rotate and it looks like the sky is spinning, you're able to basically like trace each movement in the sky. So what happens is then over a 2-3 hour period, you'll see these sort of circular star trails that sweep across the sky. And that's basically just the movement of the stars that's being captured. And so it has kind of an exciting painterly effect sometimes. And if you anticipate where the lines are going to be and how things are going to be moving, you can really give it this extra surreal effect that I kind of like. And yeah, so it just becomes this incredible palette that you can use and create with. And you never really know what's going to happen. Like at Zion, I was expecting it to be clear nights. We had all these lightning storms and clouds and thunder. So that informed which way the video would go, and that was suddenly now about this big storm. And in the last Joshua Tree video, I was there for the blood moon lunar eclipse, so that was kind of obviously the centerpiece of the quote story, and I would wrap everything around that. And yeah, I just try to kind of make them as exciting and as emotional as possible, and just try to get people's attention and recognize this is this amazing thing that's right here in your backyard, and it doesn't need special effects or AI or any of that. It's right here, and it's not that expensive.
Sure. Yeah, I did want to comment about the Zion clip that you just mentioned, because on that particular clip, it almost looks like there's more stars in the sky than sky. There's such a
Yeah,
blanket of stars. It's really amazing.
I know what you mean. Yeah, and some of that happens is if you go with, because you have to be sort of aware of the moon. So the bigger the moon is, when you're doing these big long exposure 20-second shots or so, like if the moon is full, it's almost as bright as the sun. So it can really change everything. So when you go on certain nights with almost no moon, that's when you'll see sort of a billion stars, and if the Milky Way is up, that's what that'll be the most clear. But these recent, like the Joshua Tree chips, the stars are quite a little more spread thin because the moon is gigantic, and so. But then the flip side of that is suddenly the moon, it lights up all the campgrounds and the shot, so you can see all this incredible detail in what would normally be a silhouette on a darker night. So that was kind of a fun one too, because the moon was so bright, and then when the eclipse came, you literally just everything got plunged into total darkness. So it was interesting because I had been walking around in the full moon the whole time, and then I set up the cameras for the eclipse, and I almost got lost trying to find my way back to the campsite because it was suddenly now a complete darkness pretty much, but all part of the adventure.
Sure, sure. Well, I was going to comment that I thought it was interesting how you incorporated the human footprint, really, because so many times with photography and its quest to show beautiful nature, it keeps the human element just out of frame, right? So, but you
Yeah.
show picnic tables and cars and headlights and folks on hiking trails and structures. So tell me about those editorial decisions.
Yeah, I think that's part of the real celebration of national parks is the way that they're able to incorporate people and incorporate those logistics without ruining the spectacle and without ruining the natural wonder. And it's pretty incredible how some of these parks do it with the parking lots and the signs and the trail markers, and it's quite efficient, and it serves a purpose of sort of herding a ton of people through any given year, but it also keeps the majesty so you don't feel like you're at the mall. And it's a delicate balance. And so when it really is done nicely, I try to sort of incorporate those, whether it's a really cool bridge that goes over the river, or an interesting structure where you can see, like in Joshua Tree, it was interesting because you could see several campsites, maybe 7, 8, 10 campsites on this wide panoramic horizon, but none of them felt like they were on top of each other. So you just see these little kind of bursts of a campfire, and that's kind of part of what it is too. So as much as it's about natural wonder, it's also kind of an archaeological wonder in the sense of how people they've designed these systems to work, and take a large number of people, but without choking to death on all the people, and without ruining the natural wonder of it. And so I think that's kind of the case. I don't want to have like a popsicle stand in the shot or something like that. But if it's something that I think incorporates what that balance, that's something that I think is really exciting about the parks and how they're able to do that. Each one is a little bit different, but it has that similar signature.
Are you always setting your camera up for 3 hours or is it all night long?
Well, yeah, usually that's about for the night stuff. That's about the average, probably 2 to 3 hours, because you need to give it enough time to get enough shot. I try to aim to get about a 10-second to 10 to 15 second clip, so you get pretty good at math and figuring out. Okay, I need to have if I'm at 24 frames per second, I need 240 pictures. So, and if I'm getting 2 pictures a minute, so you start kind of calculate it all, and so I usually have two cameras rolling at once, and then the trick is to kind of find something to do for 3 hours. So that's a good time to start making your campfire or cooking your baked potato, or thinking about your life, or God forbid, or all those things. But like you are trying to pass some of the time, but I think that's part of the wonder of it too. For the sunsets and things like that, you usually don't have to hold them quite as long, because you're not using these extreme long exposures. So those can usually be half an hour or 45 minutes, give or take. So those are a lot quicker. But yeah, the night stuff, it does take quite a while in order to kind of capture that dark stuff. So and then usually what happens is I'll get to 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. and I'll set up the last one and then just leave them there until I wake up in the morning and stumble around and try to find them and remember where I put them. And so that's the part of the magic too, I guess. And
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, how do you know where to place your cameras? These parks are so vast. What goes into that decision?
well, you're looking for an exciting foreground. I think that's like, because you can get the best shot of the stars and the sky, but if you don't feel anything to kind of plant you where you are, if it's just a horizon, you sort of lose a little bit of the wonder, and you lose a little bit of the perspective of looking up of it. So with Joshua Tree, it's easy because each of those trees are just this incredible, striking, unique foreground, and so those ones are easy. But often or if you're trying to tell a story, if it's like an old abandoned wagon outside of a mine, things like that, where suddenly, you can, and you're anticipating the way the moon and the stars would kind of move beyond these. And so that's a big part of it, I think, is trying to find that balance of the foreground. You're trying to get away from any lights that might screw it up. So if you don't want to be near where kind of car headlights are going to kind of shoot across the horizon and things like that, and then you're just sort of also, you can anticipate where the stars will be in the sky. There's an app called Sky Guide, which is really helpful, where you can look and say, oh, in 4 hours, I know the moon will be here, and I know the Milky Way will be here. So I want it to go right between these two trees, or this boulder, or this waterfall, but that's kind of the key. Yeah, you're looking for a dark space, but also an exciting, interesting foreground that kind of that will marry with the sky in a neat way, and hopefully try to tell the story of the place you're in and what's special about it.
And you mentioned that you use two cameras for your shoots. What are they?
Yeah, they're called Canon 6D EOS 6D. They're kind of old now. They're really the cameras I've been using for almost 15 years, I guess, like 13, 14 years. I'm sure there are newer ones with fancier buttons and all kinds of things I wouldn't understand, but I've just kind of got comfortable with these, and they have really nice fast lenses. So the lenses are a big part of the battle too, and having those, and in some cases the lenses are almost more valuable than the camera. But I just have sort of a sturdy little set I've used for a while now, and I'm kind of just too old to screw around with figuring out all the new rules for all the other ones. Maybe one day, but yeah, and it works great. And you're able just to have two, so you usually just try to set them up, pretty close to each other and get a couple different options. And that way, over one night, you can try to get, maybe 8, 10 good shots going. And you never know which ones are going to be good. Sometimes the ones you're most excited about, wow, this is it, this is the one, just turns out like crap. And then the one you kind of just did for the hell of it, something exciting happens. So just try to keep shooting, and you worked really hard to get out there. So I just try to keep them rolling as much as possible.
So it sounds like you have to sort through a massive amount of files.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's kind of, I've gotten used to it, but it is sort of like part of the ritual now when I sort of come back and, really usually exhausted and tired, and you just sort of slowly start processing it. But yeah, but it's kind of tons and tons of gigabytes and thousands of clips, and then but it is sort of weirdly therapeutic for me, and even as I'm kind of processing them, I'm able to sort of see the shots, and sort of start to kind of feel out the video a little bit as you do it, even though it's in kind of ultra slow motion as you kind of process this shot and process that shot. But you start to kind of get a feel for what you really got, and start to kind of hear the music in your mind a bit. And it's a lot of mental bandwidth and math and stuff, but it has a bit of a weird therapeutic, cathartic way to complete the journey, and kind of and start to see what you got and experience it all over again, kind of. And yeah, like I said, unlike other photography, the magic of it is you often don't know exactly what you got until you're unpacking it here. So it's kind of like the old days when you used to have to go to the mall and get your photos at the little kiosk and flip them open and stuff. So that part is fun too, and just rediscovering it, and just finding the music that sort of captures that feeling you had when you were there. And
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the music that you use in the background for your clips.
Yeah, a lot of different places. My wife is a singer as well, so I've used some of her stuff before, and I used to use Moby has an incredible program where he allows you to use a lot of his music for free. So in the early days, I would use a lot of his stuff, and then most recently, I've been using a site called Audio Network, where they just basically list a bunch of composers, and you sort of can search through mood and tempo and keyword and all that kind of stuff. And that's how I've been able to find a few of the most recent videos or songs for the videos. And it's just, that's the trick. I think if when you find the right music, then everything, you're kind of like 70% of the work is done at that point, because it just feels like these are meant to go together, and you can feel, oh, this is exactly where the eclipse has to happen, and this is where the sunrise happens. And so that helps to sort of merge it together. And I just sort of try to make them as cinematic and dramatic as possible. And probably I go too far sometimes, but that's just kind of where I come from, is to sort of try to really grab you by the shirt collar and make you look. And yeah, I think the fun part for me is like they're kind of like a postcard for me as well, and they're fresh right now. But when I look back 5 years, 10 years, I can say, oh wow, that's right, that was that experience, and that's what that felt like, and that was this thing I'm glad you did. And hopefully that has a contagious effect, and other people get excited about it, even if you just get a few people who want to go and check out the park and want to appreciate it. That's a win for me. But I also kind of just do it as for myself, and as for an adventure, and an opportunity to kind of push myself to go to these other parks that aren't half an hour outside of the backyard. So that kind of thing. Face the bears, face all the fears, slowly make my way in that direction.
All right, Gavin. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Okay. Thank you.
Again, how do listeners find you?
Okay, so YouTube, it's Gavin Heffernan time-lapse travel. So that's the easiest way. You'll just get to all this stuff on YouTube, or you can go to my site, which is gavinbheffernan.com, and that has all the time lapses and all kinds of other cool stuff. And yeah, thank you for checking them out. There's got lots more videos coming in the next couple months, so we're going to be working hard and hopefully have some new exciting stuff to share soon.
That's our show for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week, we'll be talking about the need for wildlife crossings to cut down the vehicle collisions and animal deaths that occur in and around national parks. I think you'll find it of interest. For The Traveler, this is Kurt Repanshek. See you in the parks.
The composers and musicians at Orange Tree Productions have created a unique collection known as the National Park Series that has grown to include more than 30 CD titles. Composed against the backdrop of a park's sounds of nature, these musical scores will connect you with these beautiful places and take you there, at least in your mind. This collection is the #1 selling National Park audio series in the world and provides the background music for National Parks Travelers podcasts. Visit them at orangetreeproductions.com. Editing and production work for the National Parks Traveler podcast is done by Splitbeard Productions. You can learn more about us at splitbeardproductions.com. National Parks Traveler is a 501c3 nonprofit media organization that provides daily editorial coverage of national parks and protected areas. Traveler's coverage is made possible by reader and listener donations. Visit us at nationalparkstraveler.org.